first thing we need to do with pretty much everybody is bring in awareness to how they're breathing and where they're breathing into their body. You put your forehead on your hands.
Tom Swales is a renowned physiotherapist and strength coach recognized for his innovative approach to human movement, injury recovery, and performance optimization. As the co-founder of COMPHYSIO Plus and creator of the Advanced Movement Therapist AMT system, Tom is a trusted educator, clinician, and thought leader in the global rehabilitation and performance community.
And you breathe into the floor. So now what we've done is we've taken the pressure of gravity off the diaphragm and the organs, so now the belly can breathe into the floor. So now there's gravity's assisting the belly moving into the floor.
So where should an athlete be during game time? Should they be more balanced, or should they be more in one direction or another? Or is that something that is difficult to control mid-game?
Have a good balance of just fundamental movements. And what I mean by that is, does your neck move sufficiently without pinch, pain, or pull? Can you touch your toes? Can you back bend to the wall? Can you rotate right and left? Can you side bend effectively? Can you single leg balance? Can you squat? These little exercises into what I call the self-awareness movement scan. Because when I was working with my athletes, they would come in, they're like, this feels tight. I said, scan yourself.
How do you know if they're muscular limitations or nervous system related limitations? All right, on today's episode of NeuroVision Edge Podcast, I'm super honored to welcome Tom, and I'm going to mess this up again, Swales?
That's right. Yep,
Swales. Tom Swales. He not only teaches a lot of professionals, whether it's physio, chiropractor, movement specialists. So he teaches the actual trainers, but he also works with a lot of high-level Olympic athletes and professional athletes. So we're going to get two sides of one coin here, the instructor side and also the really applicable side. And he blends a lot of movement-based medicine, musculature, and then also the rehab component where he's talking about neurology and rehabilitation and how those blend together to get the perfect essence of performance. So without any further ado, Tom, I'm just going to jump in and ask you a very important question that I think a lot of athletes think about. And that's, what's the single biggest movement mistake an athlete is making that might hinder their performance?
I'm going to go and start with, it depends on the individual. I know people don't like that answer, but it really does, because where people are, where we have to meet them, is very different for every single individual. Some people we might need to go after breathing. Some people we need to go after their neck position. Some we need to go after nerve mobility. Some we need to just make them more aware. Most people, they just need to move more generally in many different ways to, allow their body the full capacity of what it can do and reorganize in different ways. So if we're going to distill it down into one thing that I see mostly very, very common is breathing. Very often, it's the first movement when we come into this world, right? Because what do babies do? What's the first movement? They take their first breath and they do it perfect. Diaphragm, it's reflexive. You see their little bellies going up and down. They're not breathing into their neck. And they do that first movement perfectly. And they do that perfectly for an extended period of time. Oftentimes until they start going through growth spurts, or they start sitting too much, or they start doing too much of one sport, or they start adding too much tension too quickly. They're not balanced out with their movement patterns. And all of a sudden that breathing pattern changes. It starts to become more thoracic, starts to become more apical. Clients coming in, I have neck pain, I have headaches, I have tension, I carry all my stress in my neck. And they're breathing like this, with their mouth, with their shoulders. And I ask people, you notice how you're breathing? And they don't. They're not aware. I never knew I was breathing up into there. We get them one hand on their chest, one hand on their belly. Okay, take a breath in. What hand moved up? Oh, I felt this one. It's supposed to be the bottom hand. So now we have to bring in awareness. And I asked them, do you know how many breaths you take in a day? About 24,000. So you're doing 24,000 shrugs and you wonder why your neck hurts and your back is tight and everything doesn't feel good. Yeah. And breathing is also that bridge between the sympathetic and the parasympathetic. So the sympathetic nervous system is that fight, flight, freeze, faint system, emergency situations. And then your parasympathetic is your rest, digest, recover. Now, when we're breathing and we're moving like this, we're stimulating the sympathetic nervous system. That's telling our brain to always look for threats all the time. Right. And our nervous system is now sending our endocrine system and sending cortisol dripping in all day long. And then people wonder why they're exhausted, why they can't recover, why they're not sleeping. It's your breathing. As soon as we shift them just 5 minutes of belly breathing. Nice, quiet, keep the neck relaxed, shoulders into the belly. All of a sudden that shifts the nervous system into a parasympathetic state. Now cortisol comes down. Now we can get blood circulation going. The brain is happier, mood's happier. Everything starts to move and shift into recovery mode. But if we don't go after breathing first, if the breathing is off, it doesn't matter what movement we teach them out after, because if that first movement we learn when we came into this world sucks, every movement you build on top of that is going to suck. It's just not going to be as good as what it should be. So to answer your question, the one movement or one exercise, it's breathing. And it's first make them aware of where they're breathing and how they're breathing, and then get them to change that one movement. And you can see a lot of dramatic changes right away.
Yeah, starts with breathing. So it starts with breathing. Can you walk me through, for someone, let's say, who is not aware how they're breathing, can we do either the touch or whatever method you recommend to have someone who's listening right now who can test themselves to see, are they doing more thoracic breathing, or are they doing more of the belly breathing, or what type of breathing they're doing that may not be efficient for their sport?
Yeah. So we want to bring in awareness. The first thing we need to do with pretty much everybody is bring in awareness to how they're breathing and where they're breathing into their body. So it's very simply, if everyone's listening, you put one hand on your chest, one hand on your belly, over the belly button. And when you breathe in, just feel which hand moves. Is it the top hand, like Akash is doing right now? Or is it the bottom hand over the belly? We should be only breathing into the belly, and breathing should only be done through the nose, not through the mouth. The nose is for breathing, the mouth is for eating. And if we're breathing up into the shoulders, don't think about breathe into the diaphragm. The brain does not know where the diaphragm is. But if you say, well, breathe into the bottom hand, I know where that is. Brain's like, I can feel where that is. So automatically it starts to pull air into the bottom hand. Now you're breathing through the diaphragm. And if that's difficult for a lot of people, maybe because of postural restrictions, because of overuse. If seated breathing is too challenging for some people, which it can be, they just can't figure out how to pull the air down, laying on your back, laying on your stomach, take away the posture muscles out of the neck, take away the effects of gravity on a vertical position, and lay down. So now we have back and spine supported. There's pressure off the neck. So now we can't feel those muscles there. And that might be a little bit easier for a lot of people. If that's still challenging, another breathing technique that we'll use is what's called crocodile breath. They use this in yoga, where you flip on your stomach, you put your forehead on your hands, and you breathe into the floor. So now what we've done is we've taken the pressure of gravity off the diaphragm and the organs. So now the belly can breathe into the floor. So now gravity's assisting the belly moving into the floor. And that's often where we have to start with a lot of people, especially if they've had this poor breathing pattern for a long period of time, or they just can't figure out or feel their way through it. Laying on your stomach, forehead on your hands, 3 to 5 minutes, just long, slow breathing. And the rate and the rhythm in which we want to breathe is about 3 to 4 seconds inhale with a slight pause, and then 4 to 6 or 4 to 8 seconds exhale. We want to double the exhale, because when we are breathing in, sympathetic nervous system goes up slightly. When we breathe out, parasympathetic comes on. So we're constantly scanning and shifting between two states. But if we're spending more time inhalation, then we're spending more time in sympathetic. But if we double the exhale, then we're shifting the nervous system into that parasympathetic rest and digest phase where we want to live. Sympathetic is not a bad thing in the situations we want. We want to be alert when we're lifting something, when we got to run, when there's an emergency, when something is on high alert. We want that sympathetic to kick on really quickly. But you'll notice your breathing changes, and that's okay. But we want to quickly get out of that. Okay. We don't want to live there. And that's where a lot of people live, is in that sympathetic state, simply because the breathing patterns are off.
Right. So if we think about an athlete, let's say during a game, most athletes, I would say, they're probably leaning towards sympathetic because of the heightened emotions, and it's game time, right? They need to be alert. But you see a lot of athletes during halftime, prior to the game, doing breathing exercises like LeBron James, who will take a longer exhale to activate the parasympathetic. So where should an athlete be during game time? Should they be more balanced, or should they be more in one direction or another? Or is that something that is difficult to control mid-game?
So if we're breathing erratically all the time, it's a big waste of energy. You're going to drive your resources through the roof, and it's going to cause more fatigue. You're not going to be able to last as long. You're playing a 48-minute game. You want to take those moments where you're sitting on the bench, where it's in between plays, where there's a stop and play. Those are moments in which you check in with your breathing, and you want to quickly downregulate so that you conserve energy. Because it's no use for you to stay in that heightened state when the game is not on. But then you can use breathing to quickly upregulate. So doing a couple quick hyperventilations, you're intentionally shifting that nervous system back into that heightened state. So with athletes, we want to teach them how to manipulate their breathing in those moments of stress. so that they can conserve energy and they can last for the entire game or into a state of overtime, right? So we can use different breathing techniques. There's all kinds of them out there. If they're not aware of how they're breathing in the moment, then they don't know how to control it, because breathing is both conscious and unconscious. We're not thinking about breathing before we started talking about it, but now we start talking about it and now people are paying attention. It's like posture. As soon as you say the word posture, people are like, oh, they come upright. And they're like, oh, my posture. Right?
Yeah.
But they weren't aware that they were slouching until it was brought into their conscious awareness.
So the repetition of doing this breathing exercise on a daily basis is what can make that conscious become subconscious?
Yes. Because you're checking in with it, it becomes more automatic, right? It goes through the whole learning of unconscious incompetence, conscious incompetence, conscious competence, unconscious competence, right? We with every skill that we do, we always start on that one end and we want to bring it to that unconscious competence where we don't have to think about that anymore. It just happens. But we have to bring it into a level of consciousness so that we can practice it, so that the nervous system learns this is what we're supposed to do. We don't want to think about, how we're running or how we're riding a bike or how we're shooting. It should just happen. That comes with practice. And like any movement, the more you practice it with precision, the more the brain learns this is how we're supposed to do it.
And I think that's the hard part for a lot of athletes, is getting the quality reps that it takes to become more of an automated process, right? And so if you start off with reps that are incorrect or low quality, such as incorrect breathing technique, no matter, how many times you do it, you're building something that is not high quality and is inefficient.
It's much harder to break. It's harder to break old habits and patterns once they're instilled, because when you get fatigued, when you get tired, that's what the brain's going to default to, because it's practiced it so much. It has those connections. It's just easy. So you're automatically going to default to that. So it's better to learn it the right way, any skill the right way with those fundamentals, so that when fatigue does step in, you can automatically default to your training. You automatically default to that right way of doing it, so that you can continue to build other things on top of it.
Now, you've worked with a lot of Olympic athletes and professional athletes. Are you able to talk about any one or two of those that you've seen that really separate themselves based on movement pattern and nervous system control?
Yeah. So my most recent athlete, I'm still working with him, and he has no problem with me talking about it. Mitchell Hooper. He's a world's strongest man. And he came to me a couple of years ago. He just won a world's strongest man. And he's like, hey, I was told I need to come and see you. I said, okay, cool. So we went over, we did an assessment, and he's always has kind of like this right side, right knee pain, right low back, right hip, all tight on the right side. It's not stopping him from doing anything, but it is limiting his potential. I said, okay, we go through a history, maybe a past concussion that he wasn't aware of. But the one thing that was interesting is when we looked at his visual system, when we did convergence, his left eye couldn't track targets in. It would bug out. I'm like, we have a cerebellar issue, right? Also, his balance on the left side was poor. Couldn't stand on one leg for more than 3 seconds with his eyes closed. Right side was fine, but all of his pain was on the right side. And then when we looked at his squat pattern, he shifted to the right. I said, you notice you shift? He's like, yeah, I don't know why I'm doing that. I said, okay. So we're looking at his structure. I mean, he's a stiff, big dude, which he needs for his sport, but his left hip didn't rotate, but his balance and control system on that whole left side was off. It was offline, and there was a top-down control problem. And his neck also didn't rotate very well to the left. So we have avoidance issues on the left, but then we have overuse on the right. So the first appointment, after that first assessment, we did some simple eye exercises, working on convergence to the left to get his left eye to track. So we're looking at top-down control. We did some neck retraining with a band in a quadruped, do some left rotations. We did rolling to the left. We roll like a baby, do some soft rolling, hard rolling to the left. And then for his squat day, I'm like, okay, on your squat day, you're just going to put a band on the neck and you're going to do squats. And he would do it right there. He's like, I can squat deeper. No problem. I said, sweet. These are your exercises to start working on. We also did some nerve decompression as well. The next day, he texted me. He's like, I can PR my back squat for 4 reps with no pain. I said, awesome.
Wow.
He had no pain on his right side. All we did is we looked at his neurology, we looked at his structure, what he wasn't doing. He was overloading the right side because his brain's like, the right side's the good side. It's strong. I have good balance. I have good control. He was avoiding the left. And when he added 800 plus pounds onto his back, nervous system panics, right? So it's like, I don't feel safe here. I'm going to shift here. And it started overloading that right side. All we did is we looked at kind of those subtle things that weren't firing up for him, and we calibrated them. We just organized his nervous system. We provided what his body needed. Now we could look at those exercises. You're like, well, those are rehab exercises. Yeah, but they unlocked his performance. And then we have another, I like to use a contrast. We have an 85-year-old lady who's got poor balance. She's posture. She wants to get stronger. She wants to prevent falls. So what do we have her do? we have our deadlift kettlebells, we have her on the balance beam, and we put in the agility ladder. Now, we could consider those as high performance, but it depends on the individual. So what we did is we met both of those athletes where they're at and what they needed specifically to increase and improve their potential. That's all we did. He's the world's strongest man. Am I going to have him squat more? He's already doing it the best in the world. What am I going to do from a squat perspective or a deadlift perspective? He doesn't need that. He's already doing that. But I needed to balance his body out and his nervous system so that he distributed loads effectively through the body so he didn't keep overloading that right side.
Now, obviously, there's huge implications here with preventing injury with your balance on both sides. But do you think by eliminating that convergence insufficiency and the issue that was, it sounds like maybe might have been related to a post-concussion syndrome. It's hard to say, or maybe
but
it
we'll
was
also see
developmental.
that it's interesting because we'll also see that same problem with people working at computers. If someone's working on a screen and they're looking to the left all day, they're going to have an avoidance issue on the right because their brain is aware of the left side of their world. It's overused. The eyes simply going left is initiating a head turn. The head turn's initiating a low back rotation. And then all of a sudden they can't turn their head to the right, but they have pinchy left neck. They've got left low back. They've got left side problems. And simply because they're doing something repetitively thousands and thousands of times a day, it compounded over time and it created dysfunction.
Right.
So it doesn't even need to be head trauma. It could be disuse, misuse, or overuse of anything.
Right.
And long enough, low level, it can create problems.
And for an elite athlete like him, he won strongest man already. For him to still seek out and for him to still find somebody to try to get even better, I mean, that speaks volumes. But let's say that for someone who maybe isn't elite yet, but who wants to make sure that their movement patterns are correct for longevity and for efficiency, what's a good step for them to start or to seek out information? What would your advice be for maybe more of the youth to high school athlete?
Yeah, I would say have a good balance of just fundamental movements. And what I mean by that is, does your neck move sufficiently without pinch, pain, or pull? Can you touch your toes? Can you back bend to the wall? Can you rotate right and left? Can you side bend effectively? Can you single leg balance? Can you squat? So I put these little exercises into what I call the self-awareness movement scan, because when I was working with my athletes, they would come in, they're like, this feels tight. I said, scan yourself, because now I've given them the tool to figure out, I can't rotate to the left. Great. Is it your thoracic spine? Is it your hips? What is it? Now they know, you know what? It's my T-spine. Great. Get on the foam roller, do some rib lifts, do some rotations, do some rolls. In 3 minutes, all of a sudden their rotation feels better. So whatever you were doing, it disorganized your system. And now you have a 3-minute correction. A couple little exercises to balance out the body. Now everything feels the same. Now we can get to work. Because if you leave that there long enough and you start loading it and rotating through it and sprinting through it, well, that little imbalance that might be there and you start adding velocity and torque and load, that can cause a bigger problem. So I created this little 3-minute scan to give them better self-awareness so that they don't have to keep running to me, my hip feels tight. Have you scanned yourself? No, I hadn't. Okay, well, go do your favors test. Hip's not moving. Put the band on it. Go do some shin boxes. Now go do some lateral steps, whatever it is. It gives them the tool to scan themselves of why things might be tight and then to self-correct. And now they can spend most of their time not on warm-up, not on corrective exercises, but on actual training. Because the older they get, they come in with like 20 minutes of prep exercise. I'm like, we don't have 20 minutes. And by the time you finish that, you've already wasted a lot of energy for the training. But if they have something to kind of scan the body to look at fundamental movements, because if we're doing deadlifts or kettlebell swings and you can't touch your toes or your straight leg raise feels restricted, you can't swing because it's going to cause torque, right? Your body's going to protect that. It's going to avoid that. And then you're going to overload something else. But if they have something to look at, can I just do these fundamental things? Great. The human athlete is moving great. Now let's go do specialized athlete stuff.
Quick segment break, but you're going to want to hear this. If you're an athlete, coach, or parent, and you want faster reaction, this is where we start. This is called vector ball. This ball unpredictably bounces and it changes colors, red, green, or blue. We use this to sharpen the reaction time, focus, and coordination. And here's what makes it different. Whenever you see a different color, you can assign it to left, right, pass, shoot, adding a cognitive load, meaning that frontal lobe, while you're moving around, is making faster decisions. We use this with athletes every week, and we hardwire this decision making. Train your brain, train your eyes, dominate your game. Grab the vector ball in the link in the bio or scan this QR code to get started. Let's get back to it.
That's amazing. Is this self-awareness scan available?
Yes.
Somewhere?
Yep. Yeah. It's on the AMT certified website. So it's there for anybody to purchase. So it's a great tool for coaches. It's a nice tool for coaches because you teach the athletes to do this as a group, and then it saves the coach from having to send them to PT or to the AT or to go get therapy because something feels tight and restricted.
Right.
They can just sort it out themselves.
Okay.
So as a coach, it would save me a lot of time. It would save them a lot of time and headache because they get fearful. Like, well, if I move through this, it might make me worse.
Right.
Well, no, it's just tight. You did something. I don't know what you did, but something locked down on you. So now you have a tool to fix it. Now you can scan it. And if it's clear, great, move on, go do something else. Get to work.
That's amazing. Yeah. Because a lot of athletes don't have that self-awareness, or they may not have built it up yet. So I'll link that down below. So anyone listening who wants to do that self-awareness scan will have access to it. So that's awesome. I love that you created that, because it's easy access now.
It's easy access. And once you get good at it, it takes 3 minutes. And it looks at some cerebellar tests. It does a couple of cerebellar tests to make sure there's no top-down control. Clear it out. If it's not broken, nothing to fix. Move on to something else.
Now, like, let's say you're doing this assessment scan, right? You're doing it yourself, and there are some limitations. How do you know if they're muscular limitations or nervous system related limitations?
Often it's both. So if we think about what controls everything, it's the nervous system. If you have a tight hamstring, it could be nerve. Oftentimes it is nerve, right? If you can't touch your toes, you got a tight hamstring, you have a tight pec, and you go in and you look at, that ulnar nerve or that median nerve is stuck. We need to do some nerve flossing. And all of a sudden we get the nerves to slide, all of a sudden that pec calms down. So we don't need to go in there and start smashing a pec or smash a bicep or ripping up a lat. If we take care of the nerves control the muscles. So if the nerves are happy, the muscles relax, right? Now, if it doesn't fix it, if the nerve is not the problem and muscles are tight, we have to start asking ourselves, well, why is this muscle not releasing, or why does it keep coming back? Well, muscles do one of three things. They protect, they stabilize, or they compensate. So if you have a chronically tight muscle on the front, well, maybe there's a muscle in the back that's not doing its job. And the brain's just like, well, I can feel this muscle, so I'm just going to keep using this more. And then it just keeps getting tighter and tighter and tighter. Well, it's not that we need to stretch this. We might need to do some scap retraction work or some rhomboid work or some lower trap work or whatever on the backside. Maybe it's the backside problem. Maybe it's the neck, right? Maybe it's the neck. Maybe the neck's not moving like it's supposed to. So everything's getting wound up here. So the brain's like, well, I'm going to use the shoulder muscles to protect the neck, because brain cares more about the neck than the shoulder. Why? Closer to the brain. So that's why we look at things from a top-down, center-up perspective. Because in development, embryologically, we're just a series of tubes and wires, top down, center out. How did baby first learn to move? Well, it's looking at mom. It's looking, neck reflex starts coming in, and then the rolling reflex starts coming in. So it develops control here, and then it starts to roll, and then it starts to press up, and then it starts to crawl. And then once it's developed there, it starts to sit up, and then it starts to stand. So it's taking this perspective of a neurodevelopmental model and prioritizing important structures for survival, which means, well, what's the most important structure for survival? Your brain.
Yeah, 100%.
Controls everything. It's constantly detecting threats. So your nervous system is going to protect everything connected to the brain, and that's the nerves. But if the nerves are not happy because they're greedy, the nervous system takes 25% of all the resources, 2% of the mass. But if the nerves are not happy and they're not getting oxygen and they're not sliding and moving, they're going to tell everything around them to protect me. All right, I need to limit movement, because if I stretch or tear this nerve, I lose everything. Not good for survival. I can tear a pec and still get away. But if I tear the nerve that goes to the pec, I've lost the entire arm. So it's looking at what's priority and looking at how we're organized from a top-down, center-out perspective. Now it becomes more clear as what do I need to treat and where do I need to start?
And just so viewers understand it correctly, top-down meaning starting with the brain and then going downwards.
Yes.
And then center meaning starting with
central
breathing,
structures.
Central structures,
core,
and then going outward.
Yeah, and then working to the periphery. Exactly, moving out.
Now, I know there's a lot of physios that talk about fascia, and they talk about starting with the feet and starting with proprioception. How does that compare or contrast to what you're saying with the top-down approach?
Yeah. So feet, very important. Hands and feet, most sensory and motor rich at the motor and sensory cortex. Our feet are trapped in shoes and footwear that are not conducive to healthy feet. So a lot of times, because we're bipedal, our awareness and how we feel the environment and how the ground and how the foot interacts with the ground is not as ideal. So things are not going to organize from the ground up from that perspective. And we can try and go after the feet and get them to feel different. But just because we wake up the feet and make the feet strong, if we don't have good control at our center, it doesn't matter what you did down below, because our center structures are not organizing on top of a nice solid foot. So sometimes when I look at ground up, it's get back on the ground and start a relationship with the ground again. Check rolling, check rocking, right? Do some crawling. create that center strength first so that we can develop the proximal muscles before we start to go periphery. So that if we have good control here in a spine supported, suspended, stacked position, well, now once we go bipedal, everything's stacked better. It's really hard to organize a structure in a standing position if you can't feel what those muscles are supposed to do, because we're really good at compensating. It's survival, right? You go after the foot, you strengthen the foot and the fascial system's working, but that glute won't turn on because the trunk is rotating because you can't handle torsional forces. Doesn't matter
Right.
what you do with the feet. And
Yeah.
if you try and strengthen them in the standing spine stack position, they're going to find a way to cheat it. Go back down.
Compensations.
It's going to be compensations. The one example I'll use is running. Everyone's coaching running. Oh, you're doing this heel whip, or you got this Trendelenburg. It's a glute medius problem. Well, how do you know? You don't know that. It's not a single muscle problem, because we're going to run the best way we know how to get the job done. Simple as that. Everyone can do it. Doesn't mean everybody does it well, but the ones who do it really efficiently can do it longer and better and faster. So rather than try and force movement in this very complex thing that we do called walking, let's go back down to the fundamentals. Can you just stand on one leg with your eyes closed for 10 seconds? Yes or no? Oh, you can't do that? Let's go down to kneeling. Can I push you off balance by taking away your foot, your ankle, and your knee? Now we're just looking at, lumbopelvic. Can I push you off balance there? Oh, you can't do that either. Let's go down to a quadruped. How's your crawling? Your crawling looks funny. Well, crawling comes before walking. So if crawling sucks, walking and running probably suck too. And if you can't crawl, how's your rolling? If you can't roll to one side, because rolling is a single leg balance. When we run, we're coiling, right? We're using that fascial system to coil, and everything's spiraling. On that stance leg, everything's got to center and spiral and balance onto that the most effective way. So you get that nice recoil. You get that spring. But if things aren't stacked effectively and the fascial system's not creating that tension where we need it, we leak energy. So now running is not going to go very well. Every time I land on that left leg, my knee hurts. It's because you can't balance on the right leg. You're overloading the left, or your foot's collapsing, or your hip's not, or your trunk, whatever it is. Just breaking down and looking at some of the prerequisites to movement of running, it becomes a lot easier to look at, oh, you're breaking down at this transition point. You're breaking down at this fundamental movement pattern. You've lost this. Let's reestablish that. Let's start rebuilding from the ground up. And then let's go look at running, because running is the end point. You want people to think about their glute firing up every time they run. Clients will come in like, yeah, I can't feel my glute. So I'm like, well, what do you do? I try and fire it. Should you be thinking about that? Or should you be just thinking about running, breathing, and, propulsion? You shouldn't have to think about that. It should just happen. But they've lost the connection somewhere. And going from the foot up, you can, but I find it very difficult if there's some local dysfunction or disconnection at the spine. You have to go at the spine and isolate that first, and then reintegrate it into that spine stack position, integrate it into those movement patterns. So sometimes we need to isolate before we integrate.
Yeah, I like your philosophy because it's very core of what I believe too. And I think research is proving that the central nervous system is the key, right? That's really where you should start. And I think many athletes don't actually look into this until they get injured, until they're in rehab, right? And this is not really a segue, but when an athlete, let's say a youth athlete, starts playing, how important do you think is like a primitive reflex evaluation or a central nervous system evaluation? Is that useful? Is that something that you see in the future athletes doing earlier in age?
Yeah. I mean, it doesn't have to be, if a child is displaying some out of the box kind of movement patterns where they're toe walkers, or they don't want to put the feet on the ground, or their feet are turned out too much, or they're balancing, they're just like sloppy moving kids. They're just uncoordinated. That's where we might want to look at there might be some trapped reflexes, right? There might be some tonic neck reflexes that are trapped. There might be a Moro reflex that's trapped that we have to kind of train out, right? Because some reflexes we want gone, and others, like breathing, the neck reflex, the visual reflexes, we want those to stay put. We want them to be coordinated and conscious and working like they're supposed to. For most kids, especially when they start going through growth spurts, their bodies have changed. Their awareness of their body has changed, and the nervous system doesn't know what to do with it. So all of a sudden, you got this young athlete who was fast and they're coordinated, and all of a sudden they go through a growth spurt, and now they can't touch their toes. Now they can't balance. Everything stretched, and everyone's like, "Well, your bones outgrew your muscles." That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. The last time I checked, muscles stretch, bones don't. But you know what doesn't stretch very well? Nerves. Now the nerves are trapped. They might be, not sliding like they're supposed to, but at the central spine, the dura is not moving like it's supposed to. So the body clamps down on it and doesn't feel safe. So now we have to mobilize the neural tissues, and all of a sudden kids can touch their toes in one appointment simply because we allowed expansion and things to slide and move and stabilize at their spine again.
So what's your favorite drill that you would recommend? Let's say a youth athlete who just went through a huge growth spurt and is noticing that they're not aware of their body as well as they were.
Single leg balance.
Okay.
Look at single leg balance because they're all
Open
running.
eyes, closed eyes.
Start with eyes open, see if they can do it, 10 seconds on one leg, and then take away the eyes. And when you take away the visual system, watch their body start to twist and disorganize. They just can't hold on to it, and they lose that body awareness and that ability to stack over a single leg. And the reason why I use single leg balance is because they all run. Everybody walks, everybody runs. Everyone's got to be on one leg at one point during their, unless you're a rower or you're doing, swimming and whatnot. But even with swimming, you're actually rolling,
Still,
right?
yeah.
And you're spinning the head, so the neck, everything's got to be moving and spinning like it's supposed to. But single leg balance is a great screening tool just to look at motor control. And then you can kind of figure out, okay, your balance is off. Why? Is it a top-down problem? Did we have some old concussions? Are we doing something repetitively? You can look at the visual system. You can do some cerebellar tests. Great, that's clear. Might be a proprioception problem. Start breaking down into different positions, test them. Oftentimes, these kids, you get them crawling, and it looks hilarious because they can't do it. And they're like moving the same side, the same arm. This cross cord reflex is off. And we're like, well, you can't crawl. So that's why running isn't going. But what does crawling do? It works on shoulder stability, neck posture, core stability, hip dissociation. Like it works on a lot of the things that we need to be able to run and walk effectively. So you get them crawling in different ways, change their orientation of gravity. Now the neck has to come up, their eyes have to come up, and you get them moving in different ways. And all of a sudden they're walking different simply because we gave them some inputs that their nervous system was screaming for, and all of a sudden everything organized in a different way.
And then telling a teenager, hey, today's session, we're going to be crawling.
But you tell them why, right? And you tell them why. You're like, okay, video them. What does this look like to you? I'm doing all this weird stuff. Cool. Let's do some crawling. Let's do some rolling. We'll make it fun. We'll do some front rolls. We'll do some back rolls. We'll spin up the vestibular apparatus. We'll mobilize the spine by rocking on the ground. Get them to do it again and watch it change. Because now they're aware. Now they're aware of what they were doing, and now they're aware of what the changes have been made. But the key thing is assess them, show them what they can and cannot do, intervene, and then reassess. And show them what's changed. And now they're like, holy cow, I'm moving better. My back doesn't pinch when I do this. My balance is better. Amazing.
Yeah.
I don't have to sit there and tell them why anymore because they see the changes.
Right. I feel like that's much better than going into a deep scientific explanation on what you're doing. If you can just show them a before and after, they'll get it.
Yeah.
Especially if it's for their own body.
We don't have to get the scientific stuff it's for us. It's for our deeper understanding so that you and I can communicate and we know what each other's saying, right? It's so we can document it. Another clinician, another therapist can read my notes. Oh, yeah, there's the problem. There's the diagnosis. Here's what we're working on. But to the general population, they don't care. They just know I can't do this thing. I have pain. Our job is to guide them and show them how to get out of that and the changes that are made. And it has to be meaningful. But the only way to do that is show them where they're at and then show them the changes that have been made after. And that's the beautiful thing with movement is a feedback loop of effectiveness. If they're not moving well and then we intervene and we do something and all of a sudden they're moving way better, now we're magicians, right? But there's buy-in and there's belief like, I see what happened. I see the changes. I'm going to go do my homework exercises now because this made me move and feel better.
Yeah. They see the difference.
They see
and
the
they
difference.
feel the difference.
Yeah.
So let's say, we're noticing an athlete's movement not be perfectly efficient. What's like a warning sign for that athlete that maybe an injury might come because of this inefficient movement pattern?
So we need to be careful because sometimes some of these imbalances give them an advantage. So like Usain Bolt, he's got scoliosis. His right foot turned out. Like when you look at him, he's like this sway backed, hyperextended lordotic. But are you going to muck around with his anatomy too much? Like you could make him worse, but it's understanding that if he's coming in with pain, we're going to move that threshold, enough adjustments to get him out of pain to continue to train, but not so much where we might screw around with his natural abilities. Because the way he's organizing around his anatomy, it might be beneficial for him. With Mitchell, with World's Strongest Man, could I give him yoga and he needs to stretch, like he's stiff everywhere, obviously, but he needs a lot of that stiffness to load up. If we stretch away too much of that stiffness, he's not going to be able to lift the loads. So we want to add just enough to pull them away from that threshold of pain so that it doesn't interfere with performance.
Okay.
So this is where we have to be careful of how much change are we making and how much are we imposing on their anatomy, on their bodies, that it's going to deter from their performance. Because the last thing we want to do is hurt their performance. They know what they're doing. I mean, professional athletes, that's their livelihood. So we want to make them as resilient as possible with what they have and as efficient as possible without impairing their performance.
Okay. Let's go a little more specific to that question then. Like, we're seeing a lot more Achilles injuries with NBA players, right?
Yep.
Is there like a warning sign for an NBA player to like, you should avoid this movement style, this pattern to avoid Achilles injuries? Or is there like a warning sign they should be looking out for or drills they should be doing to avoid Achilles injuries?
That's tricky. So that's another athlete who really relies on their fascial system for the spring, right? They want to have a level of stiffness, not immobility or hypomobility, but they do want a level of stiffness that they can control. Again, I'm going to go back to just fundamental movements. What's your forward bend look like? What's your single leg balance look like? What does your single leg squat look like? If there's a difference on right and left and it's causing pain and problems, I'm going to want to do something to change those fundamentals, because what they're doing from a performance perspective, they need to do that in order to play their sport, in order to keep their strength, their elasticity, their bounce. They move in so many different directions in so many different ways, and they're on hard courts and they've got shoes, hard court shoes on. There's not any one exercise or one movement that they should avoid, but I want to know, do your hips rotate? Because if you're cutting and changing directions, if you hit end range rotation, you might go into your knee. Can your hip extend? Because if your hip doesn't extend, you're not using your glute. If you can't use your glute, you're going to push off that foot or that Achilles probably a little bit harder. So having prerequisite movement proficiency, right and left, if you can't extend a hip, you're going to drop into that Achilles because your body's got to find that range someplace else. If your glute's not firing up, that's your driver of power, right? All starts from the hips, transfers down, or from the ground up if you're using a block step or rebounding. So you want to make sure that you have a sufficient amount of range of motion, because physics tells us energy moves to the area of least resistance. If my ankle moves really good, but my hip doesn't, where am I going to put all those forces? Area of least resistance, right into my Achilles, right? Because it's easy to do.
Right, yeah. Do you notice a trend with the Achilles injuries being more on dominant leg versus non-dominant leg? Do you think the compensations are in play here?
Looking at some of the current Achilles blowouts, they extend, they push off that back leg. Tough to say. Where in the game did it happen? Was it at the end of the game where fatigue is set in? Is it more in the early game? Maybe they didn't have a sufficient warm up. It's tough to say. And we don't want to draw conclusions on simple observation because we don't know. We don't know unless you are working with that athlete and looking at how their joints move, what muscle patterning, what strength they have. We don't know. What we do know with a lot of basketball players, they have a lot of flat feet, but that's probably fine. But can they produce enough stiffness in their foot to create that stable base so that they can bounce off of it? Or is the foot fatiguing, collapsing, and then the heel's dropping? Maybe that's it too. I often see with my professional basketball players, tib posterior is very weak. And tib posterior is that inside ankle muscle that helps pick up the arch, right? Helps stabilize the ankle. And if from bouncing on that and allowing the foot to collapse, that tib posterior gets overstretched. It gets weakened. It can't hold up the arch. So the arch collapses. And now the gastroc tries to be a tib posterior muscle to stabilize the foot and the ankle, not its jaw. The gastroc and the soleus is a propulsion muscle. But because the arch is collapsed, the base of support is gone. Now there's too much drop into it. And now the Achilles and soleus is trying to pick up and stabilize the foot and the ankle instead of be a propulsion muscle. So we'll often see these overuse or these tears because you have a phasic muscle, a propulsion muscle, trying to be a tonic muscle, trying to be a posture stabilizing muscle. So that's where it's important that these little muscles, we'll just use the foot and the ankle, are strengthened and trained. The intrinsics of the foot, we need to have good plantar fascia. We need to have good, strong intrinsics of the foot to maintain a stable base to bounce off of. If those muscles get tired, everything collapses. And now we're trying to use big muscles to perform as well as stabilize and control. And then they fatigue and all of a sudden things tear.
How would an athlete know if that little muscle is not quite worked out enough yet? Is there a way that I'm going
to go back to single leg balance barefoot.
Okay.
If you're doing single leg balance and you see a big wobble in the foot, but everything up above looks good, I'm going to assume that there's probably some ankle foot weakness going on there because they can't maintain tension in their base of support. Now, if someone's losing balance, but the foot and the ankle are nice and stable, but they're losing control up top, I'm going to be like, most likely a lumbopelvic problem. let's get on the ground and start rolling and doing slings and core work.
Okay.
So look at what's breaking down. Where are they speed wobbling? Is it at the foot and the ankle? Or is it lumbopelvic, low back and some pelvis? And that
I'm going to do this drill.
Yeah. And then you're going to be like, oh, my eye's being driven here. Let's go look at that.
Right. Yeah. I'm going to do this drill and record it, and I'll shoot it back to you and maybe even post it for other people so they can try it out themselves. And it sounds like one small drill, but a lot of huge self-awareness benefits here.
Yeah. Big bang for your buck. Singly balanced. People come in when we check everybody's balance. You know how many times people come in and we look at their balance? I didn't know my balance was so bad. Well, when was the last time you checked it?
Yeah.
If you're not checking it, you don't know it's gone.
No, a balance is one of those things that you should be training, but many people don't even check their balance. They just assume it's,
fine.
It's,
I'm not falling over, so I should be fine.
Yeah,
but then why did you misstep? Yeah. Why did you misstep? Why did you tweak your knee? Right? You ran up the stairs, but you did something to your knee, or you flared up a plantar fascia. Well, if you don't have good control, of the limb, you can't put power through it. Right? Energy is going to leak into those tissues that are losing control, and all of a sudden you have overuse problems or you have trauma.
Yeah. If there's one advice you would want to give up and coming athletes to prevent injury, what would it be?
Have some form of self-assessment that you can check in with periodically to make sure you're doing the fundamentals, that things aren't falling off to the wayside. There's lots of ways to do that. We talked about the SAM scan. That's just fundamental movements, but have your baselines. Do your deadlift. If you have a set weight that you can lift and all of a sudden it feels heavy, well, maybe the nervous system, maybe you're fatigued, maybe something's not organizing. How many push-ups can you do? How many pull-ups can you do? Have some form of baseline that you hold yourself to, and then make sure you can do that whenever you want, right? Because that's even a form of assessment. We can use something, single leg balance, a squat, pistol squat, push-ups, pull-ups, whatever it is. Have something to check in with. But from an athlete perspective, I would say have some form of self-assessment so you can improve self-awareness, so you can catch things when they start to become imbalanced before they become a problem.
And then for going back to the world's strongest man that you're coaching, when he's about to perform the heavy lifts, do you have him do any nervous system prep? Does he have a routine that he goes through with breathing? What's the routine prior to a big heavy lift, or even big heavy training?
I had him on my podcast. I haven't even asked him that because he's obviously doing something right. I don't know what he's doing, but he has this mindset. When he's doing it, he's having fun, right? He's got a smile on his face, and some people use rage and some people use aggression. And he has this different switch, which is why he's so unique, because he's not the biggest of the strongmen, but he moves so well. He's smart. He's got a master's degree in kinesiology, and he's very aware of his body. He can figure out what works for him. But, I haven't really asked him, like, what's your routine coming in? And I don't think he would have an answer. I don't think he does anything. He jokes around with people in the back. He's like, yeah, we just kind of joke around. So he's like, some of the guys don't like it. I think he keeps a very playful perspective, and then he just intensely focuses. I don't think he does anything super unique or extravagant, but I think it's his mindset going in and how he kind of uses play and humor and just enjoying the moment to put himself into it to get that mindset going. That's from our conversations. That's what I took from it. Quote me on it. But from what I gather, that's how I'm interpreting how he approaches it.
How important do you think that is in terms of staying present, staying in the moment, and being able to focus during a competition or during a game when it comes to performance and rehab, or not even rehab, but performance and preventing injury?
I mean, a lot of mistakes happen from when we lose focus, and that can happen because of a lack of preparation. That could happen because of fatigue. So if we're not present in that thing that we're doing, we're going to make mistakes. You make that cut and you blow out your knee. That was your fault, right? That was pilot error. Somebody didn't come and hit you. You changed direction, but you did something in your body. You didn't stack something upright. Maybe you didn't move into it. Maybe something got tired. Something gave out. Whether it was a lack of focus, a lack of attention, I don't know. But where we put our focus and attention is where we put our energy. And if our mind is someplace else and we're not in the present moment, we're not going to perform at our best.
Do you train your athletes to stay focused? Is there any nervous system or breathing exercise that you usually give them for when they fatigue or when they're losing that intense focus they need for gameplay?
Yeah. Well, in between sets, we'll practice in the gym. We'll put them, depending on what phase we're in. I'll give you an example. I'll have them do a couple heavy deadlift drops. They jump over some hurdles. They do a quick sprint. They do a couple quick pull-ups, and then they sprint back, and then they get on a balance beam. They grab balls, they juggle, and they do it with water in their mouth. So I just push their nervous system to maximum effort for about 20 seconds. And then Go put some water in your mouth. You can only breathe through your nose. Get on a balance beam and juggle. So now I'm getting them to do something complex. And if they panic, they drop the balls where they fall off the beam. So I stress them out with high intensity, and then I give them something complex to quickly get their focus back in, to focus on the task at hand and not panic while they're doing it. So we'll play with stuff like that. And then when they're done that, they go sit and they do quiet nasal breathing.
Okay. So going from sympathetic to parasympathetic again.
And then before they do the lift again, they do some quick hyperventilations, go lift, right?
Yeah.
So we're ramping up that nervous system. So we teach them how to upregulate and downregulate really quickly. And they're given the tools, and some of them will pick different breathing techniques that work better for them. And I'll ask them, what lift felt easy? Because we'll use the same weight. Oh, you know what? When I did this breathing technique, that weight flew off the ground. Perfect. That's for you.
That's the one you're going to use.
That's the one for you, right? And we'll experiment. We'll figure out what works for them, because there's lots of ways to do it, but it's finding out and now they know what it works best for them. I don't need to coach them anymore. And they don't need to come to me. What do I do? What's the best thing? The best thing for you.
You taught them how to fish.
Taught them how to fish.
Yeah. That's awesome. Was there anything else that you would want our viewers to know when it comes to performance or rehab, or anything you think would be useful that a younger athlete, high school to college, needs to know before they go pro?
People will talk about the fundamentals. And to define that, what does that mean? When I look at specialized athletes, I always want to work with the human athlete first. What does a human athlete do? They climb, they crawl, they balance stuff, they carry stuff, they push stuff, they jump on stuff, they roll off stuff. I want to develop the human athlete first. So then there's lots of diversity in their movement patterns. I'll teach my hockey players how to do front rolls. Why is that relevant for hockey? Well, if I can teach you how to front roll, what if you slip on the ice? What if you make contact with the ice? You know how to manipulate your body with gravity to disperse forces effectively so that you don't get hurt. You just roll out of it, you slide out of it, you get up, you go. Not reach for the ground, blow out your shoulder, season's over. So I like to look at, regardless of the athlete, I want to make sure the human athlete's moving as best as they can with the most amount of options before we start specializing them into their sport.
Okay. And one last question, because I just thought of this while you mentioned it, and I had that train of thought earlier when you first mentioned it, was you talked about early specialization in sports. What do you think are the pros and the cons?
I'm going to say there's more cons than pros. What we know and then what society actually practices are very different things. We know that early specialization, from a longevity and high performance perspective, specialization hurts kids. It burns them out. You get overuse injuries, they're going for surgeries, and then they're like, I'm done. When kids have lots of options to rotate sports early on, they learn different strategies that they can carry over to the sport that they eventually specialize in. They become overall better athletes. When you have an overall better athlete, you can build on that foundation much better. But when kids specialize too soon, they're going to have psychological burnout. They're going to have emotional burnout. They're going to have physical burnout. They're going to have overuse injuries. And then it's not going to be fun anymore. Rotating sports through the seasons, it makes the kid excited to get back into that sport. I remember growing up, soccer season, once soccer season's over, snowboard season starts. Once snowboard season's done, all right, we're into wakeboarding, we're into basketball, right? But I was always excited to start that new thing.
Right. It's like new.
And then, but all the physical attributes I learned from every single sport helped me specialize in soccer as a soccer goalie, because it's a lot of gymnastic stuff and you're bouncing around and you're doing all, right?
One of the toughest positions.
Yeah, a lot of pressure, but I like it. And I don't like running. So I like yelling at people, running around and diving for stuff. If you're looking at a longevity perspective, a lot of the best athletes, they played different sports. And were they the best early on? No, but they stuck with it longer. And because they stuck with it longer, they got better. The kids who specialize too soon, they have early success. But then what happens when they start to plateau and all their peers start to get better than they do? What happens? I don't want to do this anymore. It's not fun.
Right.
They lose that motivation. I think the numbers, it's like 95% of gold medalists, don't quote me on that, they were late bloomers. They were not the best at anything, but because they had a work ethic and they had this desire and they worked on the fundamentals, they built a bigger, broader foundation to build from. And then when their bodies caught up to their desire and their work output, took off. But there's a lot of pressure where we live, big hockey city. Kids are in competitive hockey at 7 years old, 5 days a week. I'm like, this is bonkers.
Wow.
You're on a rep team at 7 years old. This is dumb. Yeah. And then you got to play summer hockey. So you make sure you make the team in the fall. Well, if my kid's good enough, he's going to make the team. But, people get pressured. Well, we got to do this. And then he wants to be with his friends. Well, that's fine. But if he burns out or he gets hurt, what then?
Well, I appreciate your time, Tom.
Yeah,
there's a lot of great takeaways here, a lot of gold here. So, thank you again. for your time, your energy, and the knowledge.
My pleasure.
All right. And we'll do it again soon.
That sounds great.